Broken news. You gonna wanna get a vaccine cause you gonna take a cruise? You gonna get the coronavirus, man, and then you gonna hang on the railing off the side of the jeep and you gonna sound like this.
This is Dan Dix here, reporting for Press for Truth with some important information in regards to the coronavirus, which is now crippling China. We are seeing that China has quarantined Wuhan amid the coronavirus outbreak. Wuhan has shut down all their public transport over the outbreak. In fact, 7 cities are now under lockdown in China due to the Wuhan coronavirus. All of them are near Wuhan. This amounts to 12 million people being restricted from traveling. A lot of people are questioning what this is coming from. Studies are suggesting the role of bats and snakes in the coronavirus. We're seeing disgusting clips like this come out. Revolting footage shows Chinese woman eating a whole bat at a fancy restaurant as scientists link the deadly coronavirus to the flying animals. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the coronavirus and how it is connected to SARS, the severe acute respiratory syndrome related coronavirus, sometimes shortened to SARS-CoV. We're also going to take a look at this Verge article that makes a claim that China lied to the World Health Organization about SARS. So if they were lying then, are they lying about this too? We'll also take a look at this Business Insider article that says Bill Gates thinks that a coming disease could kill 30 million people within 6 months and says that we should prepare for it as if we do for war. This was a couple of years ago, guys. And last but certainly not least, we're going to look at this very telling Nature.com article where they go inside the Chinese lab poised to study the world's most dangerous pathogens. And where is this lab located? Wait for it. Wuhan, China, the first lab on the Chinese mainland equipped for the highest level of biocontainment. So we're going to cover all of that in this video and much more, guys. Now, this, of course, is related to SARS. We see the severe acute respiratory syndrome related coronavirus, sometimes shortened to SARS-CoV, is the virus that causes severe acute respiratory syndrome, otherwise known as SARS. On April 16, 2003, following the outbreak of SARS in Asia and secondary cases elsewhere in the world, the World Health Organization issued a press release stating that the coronavirus, identified by a number of laboratories, was the official cause for SARS. Now, again, why would China lie to the World Health Organization about SARS back when they were trying to, do their inspections? Well, we see here, according to The Verge, during the SARS outbreak, Chinese officials attempted to conceal cases from the World Health Organization inspectors and limited information both internally and externally. This time, officials quickly reported the outbreak of the new virus to the World Health Organization, which praised their quick response and transparency in the press conference. So, yay, you did the right thing this time. But what about that thing they did last time? During the SARS outbreak, Chinese officials attempted to conceal cases from the WHO inspectors and limited information, both internally and externally. The only reason why the Chinese officials would attempt to conceal something is if they have something to hide, guys. And what could they possibly have to hide when it comes to the SARS virus? Could it be that it was accidentally released from one of their labs, or could it be that it was intentionally released from one of their labs? Well, I think we'll gain some interesting insight when we look at this particular Business Insider article that was put out April 27, 2018, where Bill Gates says he thinks a huge disease is coming that can kill 30 million people. It says here, if there's one thing that we know from history, it's that a deadly new disease will arise and spread around the globe. The article goes on to say here, very interestingly, according to Gates, a small non-state actor could build an even deadlier form of smallpox in a lab. So already we're seeing the billionaire alluding to the fact that it's possible that a non-state actor could build a deadlier form of smallpox in a lab. Keep that in mind. As we continue here, we see The disease that takes people by surprise is likely to be one that we see for the first time at the start of an outbreak, like what happened recently with SARS. So again, bear that in mind. He's already alluding to what we may see could be something similar to what we've seen with SARS. Again, how are they going to deal with this pandemic? Well, before we get to that, we see this. In the case of biological threats, that sense of urgency is lacking, he said. The world needs to prepare for pandemics in the same seriousness that it prepares for war. It says, if you were to tell the world's governments that weapons that could kill 30 million people were under construction right now, there'd be a sense of urgency about preparing for the threat, Gates says. Again, weapons that could kill 30 million people, he says, are under construction right now. Wouldn't that be a cause for concern? Well, how is he planning on dealing with the pandemic? Well, wouldn't you know it, we're also getting closer to a universal flu vaccine. Gates announced on Friday that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation would offer $12 million in grants to encourage its development. How convenient. And finally, the article closes out by saying, Melinda Gates recently said that the threat of a global pandemic, whether it emerges naturally or is engineered, was perhaps the biggest risk to humanity. So isn't it interesting that Bill and Melinda Gates are saying that it's possible that this emerges naturally or is engineered, that this could be, considered weapons that could kill 30 million people, that could be similar to SARS. It's possible that this is going to be engineered in a lab. Remember, guys, this was posted a couple of years ago. Fast forward to today, we now have this pandemic outbreak that happens to be going on in Wuhan, the very same place where just a few years ago, they decided to set up a lab to study the coronavirus. Check this out. A laboratory in Wuhan is on the cusp of being cleared to work with the world's most dangerous pathogen. Remember, guys, this is back in February of 2017. The move is part of a plan to build between 5 and 7 biosafety level 4 BSL-4 labs across the Chinese mainland by 2025 and has generated much excitement as well as some concerns. Some scientists outside China worry about pathogens escaping. Let me say that again. Some scientists outside China worry about pathogens escaping, and the addition of biological dimensions to geopolitical tensions between China and other nations. Goes on to say they're going to, create a whole lot of opportunities around the world. It says they've gone through all the proper channels to get approved from all the people they need approval from. It goes on to say here the Wuhan Lab cost 300 million yuan, or 44 million US, and to allay safety concerns, it was built far above the flood plain and with the capacity to withstand a 7 magnitude earthquake, although the area has no history of strong earthquakes. It's going to focus on the control of emerging diseases, store purified viruses, and act as a World Health Organization reference laboratory linked to similar labs around the world. It'll be a key node in the global biosafety lab network, says lab director Huan Shiming, which is interestingly enough. And here we see, he says viruses, don't have borders. It goes on to say here that worries surround the Chinese lab too. The SARS virus has escaped from high-level containment facilities in Beijing multiple times. He goes on to say in this article, they are openly admitting that the SARS virus has escaped from high-level containment facilities in Beijing multiple times, notes Richard Ebright, a molecular biologist at Rutgers University in Piscataway. Now, it also goes on to say here, these facilities are inherently dual use, he says. The prospect of ramping up our opportunities to inject monkeys with pathogens also worries rather than excites him. They can run, they can scratch, they can bite. So again, this is back in February of 2017, suggesting that there is a new lab being put in Wuhan, China, that is going to be dealing with the coronavirus, We already know they admitted to the fact that SARS was accidentally leaked out, and now we're seeing this. This is the latest as of right now, January 23rd at noon. This is the latest. Total confirmed 653 right now, with 18 total deaths. This is a live interactive map. But it's very, very, very interesting that Bill Gates was talking about this a couple of years ago. They began setting up in the very city where this outbreak originates from, the lab, to begin testing the very virus that has emerged from that lab. We found out that China was lying to the World Health Organization about SARS. Could they be lying about this too? You know, Bill Gates already has the universal vaccine in development for this particular problem. You know, it's interesting. A lot of people say, you know, when looking at these things, you should utilize Occam's razor, which would suggest that the simplest explanation is logically, you know, probably the most logical outcome is the simplest one. And one could argue that the simplest explanation here is that this is just happened naturally. Viruses mutate. This could have been a natural mutation that just so happens to be detrimental to humans. But I would suggest it's equally as simple and equally as plausible, due to the evidence we've shown in this video, that this could have been engineered in a lab, and this could have been released either by accident or on purpose. That's something we actually have to look at moving forward, and that's something that none of the mainstream media outlets are going to talk about when it comes to this. You're only going to hear about this being a naturally mutated disease, but I wanted to present to you today, guys, the possibility that this was either a huge mistake or something maybe even more sinister. This was actually done on purpose. Again, you're not going to get this information from the mainstream, so I wanted to bring it to your attention today. You know, these studies that are suggesting it's coming from bats and snakes, when meanwhile we're finding out that there were labs in the very city where it originated from, where they were specifically dealing with the thing that leads to SARS. Here it is. Future plans include studying the pathogen that causes SARS. Right there in this article from a few years ago, they say they're going to study the pathogen which causes SARS. And of course, what is that? It's the coronavirus is the virus that causes severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS. So it's not looking good, guys. Here we see from a few years ago, they're planning on doing it. A couple years later, massive pandemic comes out. Is this purely by chance and by accident a natural mutation of the virus? Or is it possible that this was released by accident from the lab, or maybe even on purpose, for a more sinister agenda when it comes to eugenics and that kind of stuff that the likes of Bill Gates are into?
One issue that really grabbed me as urgent were issues related to population, reproductive health.
But did you come to reproductive issues as an intellectual?
When I was growing up, my parents were always involved in various volunteer things. My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial to be involved with that. One issue that really grabbed me as urgent were issues related to population, reproductive health.
But did you come to reproductive issues as an intellectual?
When I was growing up, my parents were always involved in various volunteer things. My dad was head of Planned Parenthood, and it was very controversial to be involved with that.